There was a report that a man was pulled alive who was under the rubble for 2 weeks. Is that confirmed? Is that possible even?
I saw the man today. I talked to his doctors today as well. The right answer is no one knows for sure. Certainly the man says that. The family seems to confirm that. The doctors did some tests on him and really couldn't tell for sure whether it all fit together. I can tell you he looked pretty good. We know from previous survival stories like that, people who are buried for that long tend to lose a lot of weight. There was a story about a man who got lost in the Sahara Desert. Joy, 8 days he went without water. He lost 33 pounds and needed 14 liters of fluid to just rehydrate him.
Wow.
This man wasn't in that bad a shape, but certainly there have been cases around the world where people have survived that long after an earthquake or some other natural disaster.
That is an amazing story, truly, to hear that someone could survive that long. But a lot of people are sleeping outside now. Why are they sleeping outside? Are they afraid that the buildings will fall in the aftershocks?
No question about it. And this was something that was a little unexpected. I mean, obviously, a lot of people dealing with physical trauma still. But imagine the emotional trauma. You were already really frightened by what happened with the earthquake. But then more than 50 aftershocks have occurred over the last 2 weeks. And every time one of those occurs, Joy, people go screaming out of buildings. They're frightened. They think the same thing's going to happen again. And even people who have their homes still standing and livable, they'd still prefer to just stay outside. In fact, we met families like that set up tents in their driveway, in their front yard, because they just can't bear the idea of possibly living through that again. That's going to raise some real issues about post-traumatic stress, incidentally, in the months and years to come. Joy.
Really. And I was reading also that there were some riots for food. I saw some some skirmishes and things in the news. What do you know about that?
Well, it's yes, there have been some incidents where people have been trying to get food, and at times the crowd became more unruly than I guess people would have liked, and pepper spray was used, for example, I heard. I can tell you, Joy, I've been here for 2 weeks. I've seen a lot of these sorts of lines form, and I can tell you honestly, more often than not, people waiting in tight lines, no pushing, no shoving, no armed guards. Sort of sitting in that blistering heat, waiting for water. Sometimes the first water they've received in 5 or 6 days. Look, if I hadn't had food or water for over a week, I'd want that for myself and my family as well. So you can imagine some of the behavior, but it hasn't turned to some of the mob violence that people have been worried about. It hasn't turned to the rampant lawlessness that some people have worried about. It hasn't turned to the brutality that some people have talked about. I think that you're seeing a natural progression of people wanting to provide for themselves and their family.
So that says a lot for the people, I think. The Haitian people themselves, that says that they're dealing with it as best they can. When are you planning to come back, by the way?
I think sometime over the next several days. I really wanted to be here to be able to report some of the solutions. Joy, we spend so much time talking about the problems that have happened, but we are starting to see some solutions now, and things are starting to turn. It's a lot of work still necessary, but over the next few days, I think we'll be reporting some of those stories.
What are the major health issues facing the children? Because there's a lot of talk about the orphans now, and that the children are really in bad shape down there. Tell me about that.
Well, keep in mind that even before this earthquake, 3 weeks ago, this was a bad place to be a child and a bad medical infrastructure overall. So, 80% poverty rate. Only 2% of kids actually finish high school in this country, so that's the starting point, Joy.
Yeah.
It is tough because so many of the injuries as a result of rubble falling on arms and legs or these crush injuries, and the way that a lot of them are being dealt with is through amputation. They're simply losing their arms and legs, and it's not a very handicap-accessible society here. You really can't get around in a wheelchair that easily. So they're going to need prosthetics. They're going to need to have those prosthetics fit and refit as they get older. That's going to be a major issue. There have been some concerns about infectious diseases, for example, running through some of the camps. That's always something that comes up as a concern after a natural disaster. The good news is we haven't seen it yet, and they are getting pretty clean water and clean food, which I think is really going to help curb the likelihood of that happening.
Thanks very much for joining us again today. Take care of yourself.
Thanks, Joy. You too.